Chase Thomas the Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Tennessee Vols Sports Guys here on a Sunday night where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ over there in a snowed-in Knoxville, Tennessee. Mr. Ryan Schumpert of Rocky Top Insider. Ryan, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm ready for tomorrow when I think we're really going to start getting the damage of the snow melting it. And I made it through 6 days of the Great Knoxville Snow Apocalypse 2024 with no damage. Got lunch with some family members today, went to Starbucks and did a little bit of work. Walking back to the apartment from parking, the ice got me. Fell right on my bottom. Chex Mix to my grandma made me went flying everywhere.
Hold on. Are we talking about like down the steps, like to the apartment complex? Are you on like a different level, or hold on? What were we talking about here?
I was walking to the stairs. I am on a different level, but pretty close. Like I'd gotten past the vast majority of it, and then it was straight ice. I probably was 1 to 2 steps away from freedom of getting under a cover where there was nothing. Slipped, maybe 1 or 2 other times trying to regain my traction. Right on my back. Backpack breaks the fall. Laptop survived, no damage, as you can tell, as I'm here recording this on my laptop. So that made it a little bit better. Chex Mix went flying. Hand kind of took a hard pounding on the pavement. Absurd visual, but all that to say, I'm ready for snow to melt.
Goodness gracious! So you went ice. Did you hit the ice? Like, you fell backwards into ice?
Yeah, it was ice that got me, not snow. Yeah.
Goodness gracious, Ryan, you can't be doing that. Like you can't be going on the IL right now. It's not IL season.
Luckily I survived it. Again, my laptop took the brunt of the damage because I fell just straight backwards, and I had my backpack on, so that kind of kept it from.
That helps.
I didn't get any whiplash with the head.
Yeah, nothing to the head or anything.
Got lucky. That's probably why I got
so you're not
lucky
concussed.
Yeah, not concussed.
But also, any weird takes from Ryan tonight, just we can chalk it up to the
exactly
fall.
Right.
I didn't fall either. I will say I had one scary moment today when I was running a couple errands, and because I've not been out really outside of today for a very short amount of time, and then yesterday to go pick up pizza, where we had to get out. I was like, we got to do it.
Yeah.
And that's been it. But there was one side street because like the main roads are fine, and this is big time because this is a Tennessee centric podcast today. I'm okay just going deep dive in here into the weather report here in Knoxville, Tennessee, because everyone listening to this edition of the program is a Tennessee fan. So look, I'm not a good driver. I know that. Like I'm a pretty like I go slow. My wife, it drives her crazy. Like I'm a slow right lane, or I'm one of those guys who are too slow in the left lane. And it annoys people who come up behind me and are like, what are you doing? That's me 100%. Like I am the world's worst driver. Shout out to Jessica Walters in Arrested Development. And I want to take my time. I don't get in wrecks or anything like that. It's not like I'm a dangerous driver. I'm just not I'll get there when I get there. I'm chilling. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm hanging out in deep thought, thinking about pods and what I'm reading and things like that, doing notes in my head. And there was one little patch, though, when I'm almost home, where I'm going through. I realized at the time, I was like, I shouldn't have done that. I should have stayed on the main road on around my house. And I started sliding. And there was a car coming the other way. And that's the scariest part if you're driving in this kind of weather, where if there's a car on the other side of the road, you are like, uh-oh. Like one of y'all, you're playing chicken, because one of you needs to acknowledge that they need to stop and let you get around to, like, you just can't. Like, you're going to run into each other. The chance of a little bit of a slide and then bumper cars is very high. There was also a car, like a really nice car, right in front of me in that lane, and he's just like sitting there parking it on the street. So I'm hitting the brakes, and we ain't braking. Like we ain't braking, Ryan Schumpert. And the car, and I'm just like, what do I do here? Like I'm in panic central. I just blast my horn of like, hey man, just zoom off or something. And thankfully, last second, the dude on the other side moves over. So I'm able to like drift into the left side and then drift back in the right and be okay. I'm going like 4 miles an hour, but it's like the scariest 4 mile an hour experience of your life. And that was it. And I was like, okay, well, I got through it. I'm done, but didn't enjoy that. Like when the brakes ain't working in this weather, you're like, well, why am I at? But outside of that, it was fine. We made it through.
Yeah, I've had the same situation where on the street that I dead ends into my apartment,
Mhm.
where it's a bunch of street parking basically, and trying to thread the needle between two car street parking, even like the
Mhm.
same thing going 4 or 5 miles per hour, just like sliding a little bit, very nerve wracking.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. I'm ready for this all to be done. It was cool on Monday and Tuesday, and then everything since I'm like, all right, this is enough. We can't function in a society like this going forward. I will say I did one thing too that was dumb. Right, I'm almost 33 years old, and little things I just don't understand. My wife was completely perplexed as to why I did this. And look, I'm an Eagle Scout. Just it never occurred to me, Ryan. Like I'm out here the first day yesterday when I'm trying to like take off the ice and the snow for the first time all week in my car because I was gonna go run and get the food. Like I'm tearing it off and I'm moving all the ice off and stuff. But I'm using the scraper, my little scraper,
Yeah.
to get it all off. But I thought it would take me like 5 minutes to like move it off the dash because I had my car running for a while. So I was like, it's heating, it'll be all right. But then I'm like, man, my fingers like really hurt. And then I was like, oh, right, gloves. So I've just been out there in like 20-degree, like 18-degree weather, just like shoveling snow off my my windshield just with my left hand. So like I have like borderline frost nip in my like thumb from like moving the snow off the windshield for like 10 minutes because it took me longer than I thought it was. And I was just like, what is that? And I'm like, oh, right, gloves. But because I thought I was only gonna be out there for 5 minutes shoveling this thing off and then get in the car and drive away, I didn't really put two and two together. Ryan,
What a concept.
can you imagine the most embarrassing way of getting frostbite is
Yeah,
just
that's pretty bad.
like right in front of your heated house and your heated car, and you just didn't think about gloves because it just wasn't on your radar.
Yeah, no, that's one of the few things I was prepared for. I had the gloves, I had the toboggan, I had the fuzzy gator. It's
Yeah.
going full Jeremy Pruitt with it. Yeah,
I'm
I
not.
didn't get got on that.
Well, that's good because I did, Ryan Schumpert, and that's what makes you and I different. 24 hours after, biggest takeaway, you're still thinking about Vols Bama on Saturday afternoon in TBA, sir.
Well, I think it's just the whole. It's just the fact that it was a dismantling performance, from Tennessee. It's the most lopsided loss Alabama's had since Nate Oates has been there. Now in SEC loss, I should say, since Nate Oates has been there in four and change years. And the classic saying with basketball, a good team's going to make a run, and Alabama's certainly a good team. Alabama never made a run. They never had a run bigger than 5-0 in the entire game. Tennessee just kept pushing the lead out to more and more and more. I guess they got it to 27 with, I think, about roughly 6 minutes left in the game, and then Alabama kind of finally hit 2 or 4 3-pointers in the last 5 minutes of the game when it was over and got it down to 20. I think specifically when you talk about the game itself, I'll talk about 2 transfers and that Jordan Gainey finally waking up and hitting some shots for Tennessee. Like that's just, you're not going to get that from him. You're not going to get 13 points every half, but you just need him to be a threat out there to hit some perimeter shots because that's what the Tennessee needs from their other off-ball guard that's coming off the bench. Because you have Jermaine Meshack who's going to come in there and he's going to play lockdown defense and he's going to be able to do some tough, gritty things offensively and maybe handle the ball a little bit. And you just need Gainey to be able to hit some shots. And then on the other side, going to Dalton Knecht, just the fact that obviously he's an incredibly complete scorer. I mean, that's, one of the things I think is most impressive watching him play is that you can score with his left hand at the basket, right hand with the basket, post up, score in the mid-range, shooting it off the dribble, catch and shoot. But it really feels like his big offensive games this year have come when he's hit some perimeter shots, and then that's kind of freed up some driving lanes for him to get to the basket. In this game, he makes 1 of 6 threes, really struggled to hit shots, and was still able to kind of go for a quiet 25 points. I think that's another positive sign in his evolution and development is Tennessee, hopes he's the guy that can go out there and consistently give them, 17, 18 points a night for him to go out there and give Tennessee 25 points in a night where he really shot the ball pretty poorly. I thought was another really encouraging sign.
I also just look at it. It was just kind of like the game never felt in doubt. Like you said, Bama never goes on a run. It just didn't feel like Bama was even in Tennessee's league. And I think we've talked about in the group chat where I just feel like it's Auburn and Tennessee are in their own tier this year. And Kentucky, I think they're in a slight tier below. They can obviously still give Tennessee problems, but I don't know. I'm not as worried about Kentucky, especially not worried about Alabama to this point. But I just feel like we're looking at Auburn and Tennessee really breaking away as the two heavyweights in the conference this year, and Bama just doesn't have it. Like Bama just did not have the juice, and you just like 91 points to this Tennessee offense. I understand they made a lot of strides, but Bama's defense is not what it's been in years past for Nate Oates and his bunch. And also, Sears was like a sneaky, like Zakai is like, that's the ultimate Zakai matchup is frustrating a guy like Sears, where there was a couple I jotted down. I'm like, oh, that's a closeout from Zakai. That's meaningful because Zakai can do stuff to Sears that would really frustrate him and get a hand in his face and do little things. So I thought that was a good matchup for Zakai, and Zakai played extremely well in this game. Gainey obviously hitting some big shots in the first half. So we'll see if that is something that permeates into the next couple of games, or if that was a blip. We'll see for Gainey, but he really, really needed to see those go in. And still wait and see on Vescovy and Triple J, but they just do other stuff, and it just hasn't really mattered. Like I don't think it matters for Tennessee ultimately this year, where in years past it would have sunk their season. Like even last year, Triple J and Vescovy, if they're shooting this way and scoring this way, then Tennessee has some real problems. But when you have Dalton Knecht and Jonas Aidoo like playing the way that they are, that 1-2 punch, it just doesn't matter. And I think that's something that fans have to readjust, is like what you've needed from Santi and Triple J the last couple of years, you just don't need for Tennessee to still get to where they ultimately want to go, right?
Oh, 100%. I think that's something I said with Triple J, when he announced he was coming back, is that what's so encouraging is like if everything goes as planned for Tennessee, it's like you have Josiah to play great defense, to rebound, to give you the versatility and be able to play smaller and space the floor. And anything he gives you on offense is just gravy. And, that's exactly what happens. And I think people will, probably not yesterday because Tennessee won by 20. But if, see a night where he scores 1 point and people are going to be critical of him, well, it's like he scored 1 point. He took 3 shots yesterday. It's not like he's out there just jacking up shots because he doesn't need to. And obviously, I think, it's pretty public now. He had the flu this week, was playing with fever yesterday, and still for him to be able to be kind of that connector for Tennessee, and Tennessee for 4.5 minute stretch in the first half plays him at the 5 spot. And, I felt like the key to Tennessee's defense's success yesterday was just running Alabama off the 3-point line, daring them to shoot mid-range jumpers. They weren't going to do it. And then saying Jonas Aidoo is going to be able to handle anything at the rim. And even when he wasn't out there with foul trouble in the first half, Josiah playing the 5, Tennessee's defense did take a step back, but they were still built their lead during that stretch. Like they were able to play it for over 4 minutes, like a long stretch of the game. So you're 100% right on that one. And, I think what I'd say about the SEC as a whole, I guess it's just eye test. Like I still think Kentucky's kind of, and I would put them in the same tier as Tennessee and Auburn. And look, Auburn is incredibly impressive as they've been. Like they haven't really played anybody. Auburn ain't played anybody, Paul. Like, I mean, they haven't. Their best wins Texas A&M at home and Indiana, a bad Indiana team in Atlanta. So I think it'll be a telling for Auburn to see what they look like going to Alabama this week. But obviously, Alabama's been the metric darling, and their offense is really good. It still just feels a little over-reliant on Sears. Like, Sears was solid yesterday in a sense that he scored whatever it was, 22 points, and he wasn't incredibly inefficient. But you saw a guy out there for 33 minutes asked to do everything for the offense with no one but Zakai Ziegler and Jemai Meshack guarding him. Like, that's a really tall task. And granted, not many teams can do that to you like Tennessee can. But that worries me a little bit for Alabama, but just a big thing. They're just so soft inside on defense. Like, Jonas Aidoo scored the easiest 19 points I've ever seen. You didn't even have to work for anything, it felt like. And certainly that Charles Bediako, losing him, which I don't think anyone in Alabama expected him to go pro after last season, is just proved to be massive, and honestly probably a bigger loss for Alabama than losing Brandon Miller.
Speaking of Aidoo, though, I mean, I didn't have this jump. We thought he'd be good, but like he's been unbelievable offensively. Like the post moves, like you feel good with him inside. You feel good. He took an open 3. He didn't hit it at the top of the key yesterday, but I'm glad he's taking those because that was something we were wondering if he was going to start adding more to his repertoire this offseason. But I mean, he's just dominating, and he's dominating on defense, and we've seen that the last few weeks. But for him to have the stamina to be able to impact the game so much defensively while also impacting the game so much offensively, I did not know that was that was just something that he would be capable of. And Aidoo is he's an NBA center now. Like, you look at him and you look at his skill set, you look at his size, you look at how he's evolved his game. Like, he's gone from, I mean, I didn't know he had the size to eventually get there potentially, but he has the skills now where Aidoo is, I mean, he's just really, really good. I did not have Aidoo being the second best player on the team this year. And if that was the case before the year, if we had pulled each other, what does Tennessee look like if Aidoo is the second best player? We're like, I worry about our offensive upside. It's like, no, it hasn't been a problem at all. And you notice when Jonas Aidoo is off the court, because I think, look, Awaka, it's a little bit different for him this year, but I think he's taken a step back. I think he's not been as good as he's been previously at Tennessee. We'll see if he gets it together a little bit, but I don't know. He's just, Awaka feels like he's kind of taken a step back a little bit, but it doesn't really matter because Aidoo is the second best player on this team. And I don't know. I did not see this kind of jump from Aidoo coming offensively where he can score in so many different ways and make it look so easy around the rim.
I'm 100% with you. I mean, it's just his ability to turn right shoulder and get to that left hand. It's just been really impressive. And it's, Alabama was trying hard to make him turn left shoulder. And Rick Barnes talked about wanting him to do it more because he says he's capable. But he's just so tall, and he's got that. He's kind of developed that John Fulkerson really high release. And when you're 6'11" with a really long wingspan and you can do that, it's going to be really hard to take away what he wants to do. I mean, no matter how hard you try to shade him defensively. And it's just all tied together. We're 5 games in SEC play. Dalton Knecht, Jonas Aidoo, and Zakai Ziegler have been by far and away Tennessee's 3 best offensive players. And Zakai Ziegler's best offensively in the pick and roll, and Dalton Knecht's best offensively in the pick and roll. And we're seeing Tennessee do that more than they ever have in the Rick Barnes tenure. I mean, Rick Barnes is a guy that really likes to play with cuts and off-ball screens and not be a heavy ball screen team, but he's adapting to it, and that just leads right into what Jonas Aidoo, the way he scores well, with catching the ball, facing the basket, being able to turn around a little bit, but not throwing it to him 15 feet from the basket with his back to the basket either. It's all really been very cohesive and tied together very well, and that's one thing you mentioned the amount of minutes he's able to play and his not out without getting fatigued. That's why, and maybe if Alabama made a bigger push yesterday, I'd felt differently, but he picks up a second foul with 8 and change, I think, left in the first half. And it was I don't really have a problem. Leave him, Rick, usually when Rick leaves his best players out with 2 fouls, it can be maddening. And it's now I kind of like it this game. You want him to be able to go as many minutes as you can in the second half. It's let him rest up and let him give you 17, 18 minutes in the second half if you need it, because you've seen him be able to do it and be effective down the stretch. I guess pivoting to Awaka, when you say he's taking a step back, compared to what?
I think he was more dominant on the glass last year. I think he was impacting the game more inside. I think he feels more foul heavy this year. It seems like he's getting himself more into foul trouble. It seems like he's just finding his place. I don't know. It feels like Awaka has not been in a rhythm at all this year. I don't feel like he's felt comfortable at all in the minutes that he is in for Tennessee. I just feel like they were, I guess maybe it was just Aidoo and him were closer a year ago in terms of their impact and ability, this, that, and the other. I just feel like the minutes that Awaka's on and Aidoo sits, you can feel Tennessee bleed a little bit, and you can just tell the difference between what Awaka's doing versus what Aidoo's doing. I don't know. Does it not feel like that to you?
The thing I would agree with is the comfortability for him out there. I think all the other things were the same last year. He fouled a ton last year. He just didn't play much, so you didn't show up. You weren't ever worried about Tope Awaka being in foul trouble. The rebounding, I could see a little bit. I think it's probably a little bit of a step back. But again, I think some of that's just the sample size was really small last year. So maybe him rebounding at the rate he did last year wasn't going to be sustainable. And, I see what you're saying, but at the same time, and it's clearly a big gap between Aidoo and Awaka. But there have been games this year where Tennessee's had to turn to Awaka, and Aidoo hasn't played very well. And Awaka has performed well. I mean, Awaka was really big for them at North Carolina State and did a great job guarding DJ Burns after Burns kind of got into a rhythm early in the second half against Aidoo. So, I would agree that he hasn't, or I would say to me, he hasn't taken as big as a step forward as I expected before the season. That would be true, but I don't feel like he's regressed or necessarily taken a step back. It just kind of feels like maybe he's a year away from being the guy that I thought he could be for this team this year.
they're going to be in an interesting situation with year 2 Estrella and Awaka in terms of who starts there. Maybe Barnes tries out the two of them together with Triple J and company gone. But I don't know. I mean, he played 5 minutes yesterday, and he played 17 against Florida, 7 against Georgia, 20. It's just that's part of, I think, the finding his footing is like his minutes are all over the place right now. It just seems like Barnes isn't really comfortable with a given set number of minutes and when to put in a walk. I just feel like there's just something off with a walk and the minutes and the consistency and just how to fit him in all across the board right now, because he's a solid player and he brings value like you illuminated. I just don't know if it's going to come this year. I just feel like he's kind of wandering the wilderness this final year of Aidoo.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That you're not gonna see the massive jump this year. I think that's true, and I think it's a large part of what you said. Like, he's just not gonna see the minutes because Tennessee's playing smaller and Jonas is playing so well that unless it's a game where Jonas is in heavy foul trouble, or the handful of games, I don't know how many there's been, 3 to 5 probably, where Jonas hasn't played very well. He's just not gonna play more than 15 minutes in any of those games, and most of the time he's probably not gonna play more than like 12 minutes. So you're right, and you said it there like it's a foregone conclusion, but I think it'll be interesting to see, if Jonas. And this is a question for another day, obviously a conversation for another day. But is Jonas back, or does Jonas go pro? Obviously, the way he's played these last couple games would indicate that he will be able to go pro. But I still think there's some questions, with him, and certainly it'll be interesting to see. Again, conversation for another day.
For sure. Are you officially feeling better about Gainey and his minutes, or do you think it was just more of let's wait and see, or did you see enough where it's like, I think Gainey may turn the corner, and I think Tennessee fans should feel a little bit easier about his minutes?
I mean, I don't know if I necessarily he turned the corner. Like, he's not going to get that. It feels like, to me, Jordan Gainey's been such a regression to the mean guy all year. He was playing so well early that it was like, he's not going to build it. Like, that's just not his. I don't think he can keep that up. And then he was playing so badly the last, I don't know, 6 or 8 games. It's like, he's a better player than that. He's not a 1 of 11 to start from 3 to start SEC play guy. Like, he's better than that. So I think it's somewhere in the middle. It's just, to me, again, it goes back to, I think what he gave them yesterday, or just the element of being a good 3-point shooter, being a catch and shoot, hit open shots, play solid defense, be able to handle the ball a little bit guy. Like, that's just what Tennessee needs from this second guard off the bench. And I don't necessarily think anybody else can bring that to him. And to me, that's just why I'm skeptical to really give up on guys and cut guys out of the rotation when you have seen it even this year of what he can give Tennessee. And like, they don't need him to be one of the best players or one of the best scorers like maybe he was a couple games early, but if he can come in and be a guy that every 4 SEC games hits 2 or 3 threes off the bench, you're just going, wow, that's another weapon. And man, just like, how do you slow down this Tennessee team? And I just don't think anybody else that could fill in that role can really give Tennessee that. Like, Freddie DeLeon's a really good player and his upside's higher. His game doesn't match what I think Tennessee needs as their off the bench off guard. I like him in the backup Sakai minutes. I think you can maybe get him some more minutes there, but it doesn't, especially if Gainey's struggling, but it just doesn't match exactly what I think Tennessee ideally wants in that spot.
Yeah. And look, I mean, the other positive here, Freddie DeLeon, I mean, we've talked a lot about him on this show, but there was one moment in yesterday's game that just stands out in a major way where he has a bad turnover, and he runs right back and rips it back and gets Tennessee the ball back. Like, he doesn't give up in the play. He runs right back. It was just the ultimate, like, Rick Barnes is getting through to Freddie type of play, where it's like, to stay on the court, he knows he has to impact the game. If he messes up in that kind of way to avoid getting the early pull, then I got to make plays on defense. I got to forget what just happened and just get back. And that was something that I liked seeing. And then it just felt like for Bama, they had to be in transition to score. Like, Tennessee in the half court is just such a pain. And that's something that just stands out week over week. It's just the way to get Tennessee is beat them in transition. But when Aidoo is there in the half court, when they have all of their guys set and you're trying to score on Tennessee in the half court with how active their hands are, how much they fly around, especially with Meshack and company, who had another great game for Tennessee. so dang hard to beat in the half court. The way to beat them is when Sears just catches Tennessee napping on a quick bucket, and they just go down and score and can stop the game from getting out of hand. And I thought that's what Alabama did to keep the game close for as long as they did until it ended up being a blowout. But I think that's the one issue sometimes with Tennessee is that the transition offense can burn them depending on who they play.
Yeah, and yesterday I felt like it was more the secondary break than it was even necessarily transition of just Alabama getting it in quick and pushing. When Tennessee's got a lot of guys around the rim trying to offensive rebound, because obviously that's usually a huge emphasis for them, and was even more so yesterday with Alabama's front line kind of being soft. So I agree with that. This is probably a Will Warren question, but I'd be curious if there's some sort of stats out there of like, what's the points per possession against Tennessee when teams shoot the ball within 10 seconds? And what's the point per possession when they shoot the ball? It takes them, they bleed more than 10 seconds off the shot clock, because I would think those numbers would probably be pretty telling.
Final thing on Tennessee basketball. We've gone 25 minutes and we didn't mention his name once. Dalton Knecht just quietly, I think Nate Oates said after the game, if it was a close game, he scores 35 or something. And probably true, but what's your latest Dalton Knecht just scoring with ease showing at TBA?
Well, it's the fact that he brought it to TBA. Like, he really hadn't played that well at home this season, and a lot of that's just because I think a lot of it's been because they weren't a lot of big games, and he seems to always play better in big games. And the Illinois game was the one game at home where he did play really well in. But I mean, the Florida game is the one you circle. It was unbelievable this week. He scores, what was it, like 14, 15 points in the final 6 minutes of the first half. Like, Florida couldn't stop him, and Tennessee just went back to him possession after possession in different ways, and he just knocked down shots. And I kind of said it at the lead. The way he scored yesterday without having his three-pointer, I thought was really impressive. And then I think this is one of the first observations I had of him, and certainly it was easy to win the draw after he threw that dunk down at Michigan State, but he just gives Tennessee's transition offense a whole nother element. If it's just like you get the ball out in transition and have him running down the opposite wing, get the ball to him, he's going to score 85, 90% of the time. And as Tennessee wants to play faster and wants to push the pace and has a point guard that can do that pretty well in Zakai Ziegler, it's one of the many things that's making Tennessee's offense a lot better.
Absolutely. Lance Hurd, officially in the boat. 2 transfers. We'll talk about them both here. Ryan Schumpert, but he's been in the school directory for a couple days, and it seemed like Lance Hurd was all but official to Tennessee. Gigantic get. And what have we always said in this program? Never a doubt on the offensive line recruiting front. You and I have said for years, Ryan Schumpert, never a doubt, never a worry. And officially, Lance Hurd comes in left tackle, presumably right away for the Tennessee Volunteers. John Campbell moving to right tackle. That's suddenly the best place you've been in. I think you can argue since Josh Heupel's been here, depending on what Hurd looks like. But I think the upside is so strong just because, look, if you're going into next year with Hurd at left tackle, health permitting, by the way, Hurd at left tackle, we'll see at left guard. But I mean, one of Lampley, Karich, maybe Sham, maybe Weissenlang. It's a lot of good options. Like, you have a lot of good options at left guard, and you would assume whoever comes through and wins that battle, they'll be solid. Cooper back at center, Spraggs at right guard, and Campbell at right tackle. I mean, that's just a veteran, solid group for year one of Nico Iamaleava's time under center. I mean, you can't really ask for much more, because even if you had landed Seton, it's a true freshman. You're starting a true freshman there, and we don't know how he would have done at left tackle right away for Tennessee. Now you get someone who has SEC experience, a year of it, would have started at a lot of places all around the country, and the only reason he left LSU is because of a depth chart problem, and they have enough offensive tackle talent that he just couldn't get on the field. But he'll start right away, presumably at Tennessee. And look, I just think you can't really ask for much more from Tennessee for 2024 on the offensive line front. And also, the best part, he's a multi-year guy. He's not a Band-Aid transfer. He is someone that you want to be able to pencil in for the next 2 to 3 years at Tennessee, and that's huge, just to have that solidified.
I would take 22 offensive line over this year, or over 24.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, Darnold's a top 10 pick,
No, hold
man.
on. I
He's
love Darnold, right?
unbelievable.
What I'm saying is the problem is left tackle was still back and forth with Crawford and Mincy. It wasn't like you had the left side settled. You were going into Bama with Crawford.
Yeah, I mean, I understand all that, and you were so good everywhere else and so good at right tackle that you could slide
Yeah.
protections and do everything you needed to help it, that you just never had to worry about Darnell Wright. And
Oh, for sure.
so I would take 22.
That's fair.
Certainly, you can't ask for anything more from the starting offensive line. I would completely agree with that. You could ask for a little bit more depth. You still have Dane Davis as your third offensive tackle, and Sam Umarov, I guess, is your fourth offensive tackle. You don't have the depth that you have at offense that you'd like to have at offensive tackle. But no, I mean, it was someone that they had to get. Absolutely massive addition for Tennessee, and it just shores up the spot. I mean, it just feels like Tennessee keeps on scrambling and finding enough answers to be pretty solid on the offensive line. To me, the big question will just be how much better can they be, not as a run blocking as a whole, because I think they ran block pretty well this year, but in the short yardage when teams knew they were going to run the ball. Because that's where in 2022, teams knew they were going to run the ball. Tennessee could still run right up the middle and get 2 yards on them. They couldn't do that last year. We saw it against Alabama. If they could at Alabama, then they, very well might have won that football game. So to me, that's the big question. Obviously, left guard will be the position battle question. But as we talked about on here, they got a number of, I think, serviceable guys that they can get by with. So it's a massive win. And then, yeah, I mean, I kind of go back and forth on that of like her just going into his true sophomore year. Like that's arguably the most encouraging part of it. And I would say it is the most encouraging part of it is the fact that it's not just a Band-Aid. It's not just a 1-year guy. And as you look ahead to 2025, a year that you have frequently circled as the year, and Tennessee's going to lose a lot of starting offensive linemen, you have your left tackle back. I do caution it just by saying that it's complete lawless out there with the transfer portal. He can enter the portal again in the year if he wants to. Obviously, Tennessee's not thinking that way. They hope everything goes well. But that's the one thing that kind of makes me hesitate from saying that that's almost the best part about landing Lance Hurd is the fact that you have your left tackle spot locked up for at least 2 years and, maybe 3.
And Jeremiah is his cousin, right? Like that they are related. Okay. I mean, that helps because he's in the boat, true freshman, and hopefully that is a big part of it. Is like, hey, he gets to play next to his cousin, and they might move him to offensive line because that was the rumor coming in. Is like he's a long-term developmental offensive line guy. Like he's coming as a defensive line, but there's potential of moving him on to the tackle because he's got crazy size too. Where
massive, like
if you look at his measurables, he's huge. Like Jeremiah is gigantic out of Rome, Georgia. So we'll have to monitor that. But I mean, like it's just you feel a lot better, and I'm sure Nico and company and Ellerby and Heupel and the staff just can kind of breathe easier. It's just, hey, John Campbell was solid and at left tackle. Now he gets to go to right tackle, and look, that's a good place to be where you're one of your you just knew what you had in John Campbell week over week. He was never a liability, and now you have that right hand side plugged in. You got Dane Davis in a spot that is much more comfortable, which is the third swing guy, which is what he should be at this point. And look, that's just you feel better about what Tennessee can ultimately get to for Nico in this offense. It's just that like you said, the short yardage run game, that stuff is a TBD with this offensive line and company. And then when you think about 2025, where you said I've circled and I've wondered about what Tennessee will be and like why I think that's just a big year. And a lot of it too, it's just the wide receivers who I think will have a bigger role and just kind of the guys who got Tennessee to the CFP conversation 2 years ago. I think Tennessee will be closer to that kind of situation in terms of what I think the offense will ultimately be next year. But I just look at it as like, hey, well, you still have a lot of blue chippers that are options. Like the options that you have going into next year, they're unproven, but Satterwhite 4-star, Max Anderson 4-star, Bennett Warren high 4-star, Sham still high 4-star, Bison Lang 3, I think, out of Alabama. But you have Hurd obviously 5-star on one side. Like you still have a lot of talent on the offensive line that you've recruited really well there this past cycle, and we'll see in a little bit better 2 cycles ago too. I don't know. I'm just not as worried about it in terms, and they'll go in the portal and they'll show some upgrades and they'll do whatever. But this year alone, I think if you're a Tennessee fan, you're breathing a sigh of relief because the offensive line should be really good in 2024, barring injuries.
Really good. Maybe a little bit of a stretch, but definitely good. Definitely should be good and has the potential to be really good. And yeah, massive sigh of relief. And I think maybe the biggest thing you take away from it is the gamble of letting Gerald Mincey walk paid off. You upgraded.
Yeah.
Like when you let Gerald Mincey walk, especially that late in the cycle, it was like, all right, there's a world out there where you're gonna be really bad at one of the tackle spots next year,
Yeah.
or at the very much at least underwhelming. And they let Mincey walk, and they did what it took to get a top 3, offensive tackle in the transfer portal. One of the other top offensive tackles in the transfer portal was always going to go to Iowa, and Proctor, that's his name, right? The Alabama kid. I'm blanking on it. Yeah,
Caden Proctor.
So you landed one of the best. Yes, you landed one of the very best options out there, and upgraded over Gerald Mincey. And obviously that was a gamble and a risk by Tennessee's coaching staff when they were letting Mincey go, and it paid off. So yeah, you feel a lot better about it. And one of probably, again, the biggest gambles that Tennessee's coaching staff has made this offseason is one that paid off for him.
On the flip side, on the defensive line, Jackson Moi comes in from Stanford, defensive tackle, played a lot of football there, flashed in that regard. Kind of an under the radar pickup, 3-star kid, but a rotation guy where Tennessee, we've talked about, they were quietly very thin on the interior. They're loaded on the edge. Like Tennessee, I don't even know how they're going to divvy up these snaps with Ross, Joseph, and Pierce and company. Like they got dudes upon dudes on the outside, but in the interior, they need Tyree Weathersby to be healthy and be a factor in this defensive line room. You get Omar Nolan back, you get Amari Thomas back. Those are huge. But you need some other guys like Bryson Easton also back, but you needed a couple more bodies. Elijah Simmons and Jackson. You just look at it and you're like, Jackson, I think, is another one where he just solidifies your depth, where you can withstand some injuries into the interior and still be okay. And he just feels like he's a good hit and a good solid rotation guy. He's not going to change the directory of Tennessee's defensive line, but I think he should, by all means, be a nice rotation guy and nice depth piece in that interior and going to challenge for snaps, I think.
I don't think Tennessee ended up necessarily being thin at defensive tackle when they got Norman Lott back and they got Amari Thomas back, but they definitely weren't deep. So it is good to add another guy from an injury standpoint. I don't really know where he fits in the rotation or what spot, but yeah, he's certainly a guy that's capable of going out there and playing 15 to 20 snaps any given game for Tennessee. And I think two things that stand out to him about me: versatility. He slid over and played some, strong side defensive end for Stanford last year, which, get another option, another spot that he can play. And he is also, all those guys we just named on defensive line, tons of those guys are going to be gone. They're going to be gone after this season. And Tennessee needs some guys to be able to come in and be able to play in 2025, and guys that have a little bit of experience and guys that have been inside of the program. So I think that's almost where it's more encouraging. Just going to be, he's played 2 years at Stanford, so he's got 3 years to play 2 at Tennessee. And the fact that he'll be back in 25, along with his versatility, are kind of the things that stand out the most to me.
Yeah, and look, you could never have too much depth. He's a nice piece, and Tennessee's going to have dudes on the defensive line. I think when you look at just who's back and just the rotation options for Eckler and Rodney Garner and company over there, I mean, it's going to be fun. Like they've recruited very well there. They've handled the portal very well there. I think Tennessee's going to be really strong. And Tyree West quietly flashed in the Iowa Citrus Bowl game, and I think he'll be more than serviceable replacing Tyler Barron on the opposite side. But I don't know. I think Tennessee's in good shape on the defensive line at this point.
No doubt. I mean, that's the one spot that Tennessee's been at least solid at the whole entire time, or the one defensive spot that Tennessee's been solid at Josh Heupel's entire tenure. It's what going out and hiring a guy like Rodney Garner does, and they've continued to recruit well there. And they haven't recruited as elite on the inside. And I guess that's probably a lot of credit to Mike Eckler for how well he has recruited at the edge spots. But they have a bunch of dudes there, and they have a bunch of solid guys that can play snaps and not be liabilities. You're not going to be soft in the inside. And Rodney Garner is going to have that group very solid. And then when you have the studs that you have on the edge, you don't need those guys to be a ton more. So, again, I think we maybe said it in our first podcast after the Citrus Bowl. I think the defense line will again be even better last year than it was this year. And certainly that was, one of the best position groups on the entire team, and definitely the best position group on the defense.
Absolutely. Final thing here, Ryan Schumpert. Weekly baseball player spotlight. We're a little over a month away from Tennessee baseball being back here. So our weekly player spotlight, Christian Moore. Tony Vitello quietly pouring a little water on Christian Simo, being the everyday shortstop for Tennessee in 2024. But wherever he plays, he's going to be a big factor. He's probably Tennessee's best hitter going into 2024. He's probably who you trust the most going into 2024 with the bat. But look, what can Vol fans expect out of Simo in 2024? What are you looking for him to improve upon from last year, and where do you think he ultimately best fits on this Tennessee team?
Well, what you get is just a complete hitter, a guy that hits for power, hit over 300 last season, and a guy that carried Tennessee's offense at times. And certainly Tennessee's offense was not particularly good at least by College World Series standards last year. It was not very good, and he was a guy that was unbelievable. You go back to the Clemson Regional when he, I believe it was, hit more home runs than outs he recorded.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that was the stat. I mean, just unbelievable. Or maybe it was as many. And there was another weekend too. I'm trying to remember which one it was. Maybe Georgia, sometime in the back. Maybe there was one other SEC weekend where he was just incredible for Tennessee. So I think when you talk about where you're looking for him to improve, it's consistency. It is consistency as a hitter. He was a little bit streaky at times. Certainly not as streaky as some of the Tennessee's batters, but it was a lot of really, really high boom and then just kind of average hitter at times. I don't think he was ever necessarily a bad hitter through a lot of these weekends. And defensively, he wasn't necessarily always the most consistent, a little erratic. And now you have him going into his junior year and maybe stepping into a big spot. And certainly, I think it's most ideal for Tennessee if he's their starting shortstop. Like where does he fit best? Tennessee hopes he fits best at shortstop because I think that's presents the best opportunities for them to have the best lineup, and it's a guy that's a veteran who's played a lot of SEC baseball starting at shortstop instead of a young guy or some sort of newcomer. Obviously, it could be a JUCO guy in there too. Question is, can he do that? Can he play with enough consistency? Because there were stretches of the season he wasn't even a particularly good defensive second baseman last year. Now, that wasn't anything I don't think to do with talent. He's got a good arm. He's an athletic guy. I think he's certainly capable. He made a handful of plays that, if they weren't jaw droppers, were at least really, really nice defensive plays. It's about going out there and being able to do it consistently. Was over at Lindsey Nelson Stadium a lot this fall. Rarely was there a day Christian Moore was not working at shortstop for a long, long bit. So I think Tony Vitello said at one point, he said, he's going over there and he's not moving until I tell him to. Christian Moore wants that job. He wants to be the starting shortstop. And certainly Tennessee hopes that there's a level of maturity and a level of gained consistency where he can become that guy for them this season.
Does it affect the ball ceiling if he's not shortstop and he's at second and you have to move some guys that you don't necessarily want to move around?
Yeah, I think it probably does. I mean, I think it's hard to say by how much. I just think it gives them a lot more flexibility if he plays shortstop. And just the fact, I think, even from a defensive standpoint, his ceiling is probably the best of any of those shortstop options. I mean, Ariel Antigua was kind of the same way in that can do a lot of really impressive things there, but it's just hard to imagine. You don't see a whole lot of true freshmen starting at shortstop and being really good defensive shortstops in the SEC. So I think it does from a number of ways. Certainly the versatility and the way the Tennessee would be able to tinker with things, which I think they're going to do a lot, at least early in the season with the depth they have, but also just from the fact that I think he has the best opportunity to be, at least has the highest ceiling of any of their shortstop options.
He hit 17 home runs a year ago. What do you think the number is this year? If you had to guess the bump, do you think he's in the 23 to 25 range? Where do you think he gets to?
I think that's hard to say. I mean,
and the reason I bring that up, he had 10 in 2022. So he's gone up 7. If he went up 7 again, he's in that 2024 or the 24-25 range.
See, I don't think that's a fair exercise to do because he probably got significantly more at bats.
Only 100.
Than he didn't. Yeah, only 100 more at bats. And where does 100 more at bats going to come from this year? Because he was in the starting lineup every single game. So I'll say he gets above 17, but doesn't get to 20. The number I look for, the number I want to see raised, I think he hit 13 doubles last season. get up to 15 plus doubles, get to 20 doubles and 18 home runs, or 19 home runs and 17 doubles. Be more just a lot more extra base hits just besides home runs. That's the number I would look at, is how much more consistent can he get there.
Final thing, true or false, at the end of this 2024 Tennessee baseball season, we will say that Christian Moore was the best 1 through 9 player on Tennessee's roster this year.
I'll say true.
Yeah.
I think so. Like, to the talent, I think he's the most talented guy in Tennessee's lineup.
Mm.
The question is, can he be consistent? Not put it all together, because we've seen him put it all together. Can he be consistent through an entire season, and just string together a lot of impressive stuff? And consistency has been the question for him throughout his career, and being, I think, even just like not necessarily just physical consistency, but being mental consistency, being in the right spot, having the right even kill attitude. I think with another year, he's matured more, and I think he'll get closer to that. And I think because he has the highest ceiling of any of those guys, and he's been through the ringer a full year, and he's really had 2 years of being a factor, I can see it. I think he's could be a classic guy that you see in the SEC that plays a lot as a freshman and sophomore, and then makes a massive jump as a junior, and is one of the guys that's going to be in the consideration and in the conversation for SEC Player of the Year.
I like it. Ryan, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at RockyTopInsider.com this week?
Yeah, so plenty of stuff coming off of the Alabama game, and then obviously with all the transfer portal news of Sunday. Tennessee will have a open date in basketball in the middle of the week before they head to Nashville to face Vanderbilt on Saturday. So probably a little bit less basketball coverage, but we'll still have a good bit of stuff, and kind of not quite a checkpoint because they're only 5 games in, but kind of reassessing the basketball landscape. And then obviously with classes starting this week for Tennessee, I guess Tuesday, it was supposed to be tomorrow, but Tuesday, that means winter workouts for football start back. And that means we're getting a little bit better feel of what the roster is going to be like, and getting definitive answers on, who's back and who's going to be on the team for some of those guys that haven't made announcements. So we'll have plenty of stuff starting to look forward to the 24 season. We'll have our first kind of projected depth chart, and look at a bunch of that stuff as Tennessee's roster starts to get a little more rounded out. In the modern day of college football, the roster's really never set. Heck, Carlos Fills-Ami was on the team showed up in August 2 years ago and was there for about 2 weeks. So that's probably the perfect example of how you never say that the roster is completely set, but we're starting to get a better idea of what it's going to look like, and some very, very start of the football calendar for the 2024 season. We'll have plenty of content on that.
Absolutely. Ryan Schumpert, always a pleasure, my friend, and I will talk to you next week.